The aurora borealis danced across the Norwegian sky, its green and purple waves masking the burning trail of what Nikolai Larsen first assumed was a meteor. Through his observatory's telescope, he tracked the object's descent, noting its unusual trajectory and controlled movement pattern. This was no meteor. The object crashed in the dense forest about 12 kilometers from his remote research station. In 15 years of studying astronomical phenomena, he'd never seen anything quite like it. The rational part of his mind said to call it in to his colleagues at the University of Oslo, but something held him back. Instead, he grabbed his emergency pack, winter gear, and headed out into the -20-degree night. The trek through snow-laden pine trees was arduous, but the crash site's glow guided him. As he approached, he noticed the air growing warmer, the snow melting in perfect circles around what appeared to be debris field. The object had broken into several pieces, leaving a trail of iridescent metal unlike anything he'd seen on Earth. "Remarkable," he whispered, pulling out his handheld spectrometer. The readings made no sense, elements that shouldn't exist in nature, energy signatures that defied known physics. A sound caught his attention, something between a growl and a word. Nikolai turned slowly, his breath catching in his throat. There, emerging from behind a twisted piece of hull, stood a figure that challenged everything he knew about life in the universe. She, and despite her alien nature, there was something undeniably feminine about her, stood nearly 2.5 meters tall. Her skin had a subtle bluish tinge that seemed to shift with movement, covered in what appeared to be both armor and some kind of biological plating. But it was her eyes that captured his attention, vertical pupils in iris that swirled with colors he had no names for. She spoke again, this time clearly a command in a language that seemed to resonate in his chest rather than his ears. When he didn't respond, she moved toward him with frightening speed, especially for someone who appeared to be injured, judging by the dark liquid dripping from her side. Nikolai held up his hands, dropping his instruments. "I'm not a threat," he said calmly, his years of meditation practice helping him maintain his composure. "I'm a scientist. I study the stars." The alien warrior cocked her head, studying him with those mesmerizing eyes. She touched something on her armor, and suddenly her words transformed into accented but understandable Norwegian. "You are not military?" she asked, her voice carrying harmonics that no human vocal cord could produce. "No. I'm an astronomer. My name is Nikolai." She seemed to consider this, her stance remaining defensive but less overtly hostile. "I am Thena, third blade of the Arcarian vanguard." She winced, her hand going to her side. "Your atmosphere, it's affecting my healing capabilities." Nikolai took a careful step forward. "I have a research station nearby. Medical supplies. It's isolated, no one else around for 50 kilometers. Why would you help me?" Thena asked, her pupils contracting to thin lines. "Because you're injured, and because..." He gestured to the wreckage around them. "This is the most important moment in human history. First contact should begin with compassion, not fear." A sound emerged from her that might have been a laugh. "Your species is strange. On my world, warriors don't accept help from unknown entities." "Good thing we're not on your world then," Nikolai replied, surprising himself with his boldness. Another sound, definitely a laugh this time. "Perhaps not all strange things are unwelcome." She straightened up, towering over him. "Lead the way, Nikolai the Star Watcher. But know that if this is a trap, my last act will be to ensure you don't survive to regret it." The trek back to the station was slow and tense. Nikolai found himself oddly fascinated by how Thena moved, a predator's grace combined with a warrior's discipline. She asked questions about Earth's atmospheric composition, gravitational force, and astronomical position, each query revealing an intelligence that matched her martial bearing. At the station, Thena had to duck to enter. She examined everything with intense curiosity, especially his telescope and astronomical equipment. "Your technology is primitive," she observed, but your understanding of stellar phenomena is, surprisingly sophisticated. We make up for our technological limitations with determination and creativity, Nikolai replied, gathering medical supplies. Though I suspect my first aid kit wasn't designed with Arcarian physiology in mind. Your concern is noted, but unnecessary. I require only clean water and bandaging. My body will adapt to your atmosphere soon enough to heal itself. She removed pieces of her armor, revealing more of the shifting blue-tinted skin underneath. The wound was a deep gash that seemed to be slowly closing on its own. As Nikolai helped clean and bandage the injury, he couldn't help but ask, "Why were you in Earth's orbit? Was this first contact intentional?" Thena was quiet for a long moment. "I was pursuing something. Something that should not have come to your world." She met his gaze. "My ship was damaged in the engagement. The crash was unplanned." "What were you chasing?" "That information is classified by Arcarian military command." She flexed her arm, testing the bandage. "Though I suspect you'll learn soon enough. What crashed with me was not the only thing I was pursuing." Nikolai wanted to press for more information, but the set of her jaw told him it would be pointless. Instead, he focused on practical matters. "You'll need somewhere to hide while you heal. The crash will attract attention." "Yes." Thena stood, her head nearly brushing the ceiling. "Your government agencies will come. They always do. And they will not understand what they're dealing with. I have a basement level. It's shielded for some of my more sensitive equipment. It might hide whatever energy signature you give off." Thena's eyes swirled with new colors. "You would shelter me? Knowing nothing about me or my kind? I know you could have killed me at the crash site but didn't. I know you're injured and far from home. And I know that if I don't help you, someone else will find you, someone who might not see the person behind the warrior." "Person?" She tested the word. "You see me as a person, not a creature? Intelligence, consciousness, self-awareness, these make a person, not their planet of origin." Thena was silent again, studying him with those incredible eyes. Finally, she said, "Your philosophy is as unusual as your behavior, Nikolai the Star Watcher. My people would say such thinking makes you weak. And yet..." She touched her bandaged side. "Here I stand, accepting help from a primitive species, and finding wisdom in their words." A deep rumbling sound filled the air, aircraft, probably military, approaching the crash site. Thena tensed, her hand moving to a weapon Nikolai hadn't noticed before. "The basement," he said quickly. "We need to move now." As they hurried to the lower level, Thena grabbed his arm with surprising gentleness. "This changes everything, you understand? Your world, your life, nothing will be the same after tonight." Nikolai smiled. "Good. The same was getting a little boring anyway." Another of those alien laughs. Perhaps there is something to be said for strangeness after all. As he helped her settle into the basement, Nikolai couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just first contact between species. It was the beginning of something both wonderful and terrible, a moment that would ripple across two civilizations. And somehow, in this remote corner of Norway, he found himself at the center of it all. The sound of helicopters grew louder above them. Thena's eyes swirled with dark colors. "Tell me, Star Watcher, do you believe in destiny?" "I believe in patterns," he replied. "In the way seemingly random events align to create something meaningful." "Then let us see what pattern the stars have drawn for us," she said, her voice carrying that strange harmonic that seemed to resonate with something deep in his soul. Above them, the night filled with searchlights and voices. Below, in the basement of a remote research station, two beings from different worlds began an unlikely alliance that would challenge the definitions of duty, humanity, and love itself. The first contact had been made, but it was only the beginning of a much larger story. Dawn broke over the Norwegian forest, painting the snow in shades of rose and gold. In the basement of his research station, Nikolai found Thena studying his collection of astronomical charts with intense focus. She'd arranged them in a pattern he didn't recognize, her iridescent fingers tracing invisible lines between star systems. "Your charts are incomplete," she said without looking up. "There are 17 habitable systems within this sector alone that you haven't discovered." 17? Nikolai set down the breakfast he'd brought, a mixture of protein, fruits, and what he hoped would be digestible by Arcarian physiology. That would revolutionize our understanding of habitable zones. Thena's eyes swirled with amber tones. "Knowledge can be dangerous. Your species may not be ready for what lies between the stars." She touched a point on one of the charts. "My target passed through here before I intercepted them. They've been watching your world far longer than you realize." "What exactly are you hunting?" Nikolai asked, noting how her biological armor plates shifted with her movements, almost like scales catching light. "A deserter," she replied after a long pause. "One who carries secrets that could destabilize not just my civilization, but dozens of others." She finally looked at him, those vertical pupils dilating slightly. "Including yours." Before Nikolai could press further, his security system chimed. He checked the camera feed on his tablet. A group of men in civilian clothes but with unmistakably military bearing were making their way up the access road. "They're here sooner than expected," Thena observed. "Your species' persistence is admirable, if inconvenient." "Stay here," Nikolai said. "The basement's shielding should mask your presence." "You trust too easily, Star Watcher," Thena called as he headed upstairs. "How do you know I won't simply kill you and escape?" He paused on the stairs. "Because you're curious. About us, about me. And warriors don't waste opportunities to learn about potential allies." Her harmonic laugh followed him up the stairs. He'd noticed it affected him less strongly now, either she was modulating it, or he was adapting to her alien characteristics. Both possibilities were fascinating from a scientific perspective. The knock on his door was firm but not aggressive. Nikolai opened it to find 4 men in winter gear, led by a sharp-eyed woman who introduced herself as Agent Erickson. "Dr. Larson," she said, "we're investigating an unusual meteorological event from last night. Given your expertise in astronomical phenomena, we hoped you might assist us." "Of course," Nikolai replied, letting them in. He'd spent the night preparing his story. "I observed what appeared to be a bolide meteor around 2340. The fragmentation pattern was unusual, but given the aurora activity, optical illusions were possible." Agent Erickson's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Did you investigate the impact site? In that weather?" "No, I recorded my observations and plan to check the site today." He gestured to his monitors displaying actual meteor data from the previous week. "I can show you my recordings." The questioning continued for nearly an hour. They were good, very good, but Nikolai's reputation as an obsessive researcher worked in his favor. He buried them in technical details about meteor composition, atmospheric entry patterns, and spectroscopic analysis until their eyes glazed over. Finally, Agent Erickson stood. "Thank you for your cooperation, Dr. Larson. We'll need to examine the impact site. Please don't disturb any debris you may find, it could be radioactive." "Of course. Though I should mention the local bears are coming out of hibernation. The crash site is near a known den area." This was a lie, but one that might discourage too thorough a ground search. After they left, Nikolai waited 30 minutes before returning to the basement. He found Thena examining his old physics textbooks, her expression unreadable. "Your authorities are more observant than you realize," she said. "They left surveillance devices." "I know. Small cameras and audio receivers. Already taken care of." He held up a signal jammer he'd modified years ago for measuring celestial radio waves. Being paranoid about government interference with research has its benefits. Thena set down the physics book. You lied to your authorities to protect me. Why? Because they're not ready for you. First contact needs to happen gradually, controlled. If they found you, they'd react with fear, try to contain you. Study you. And you don't wish to study me? Her head tilted, those mesmerizing eyes catching the basement's dim light. Of course I do. I'm a scientist. But there's a difference between studying with someone and studying something. He sat down across from her. You're a person, remember? That harmonic laugh again, but softer this time. Your distinction is meaningful. On my world, science and military power are inseparable. Knowledge serves combat effectiveness. Nothing more. That sounds limiting. It is efficient. But something in her tone suggested doubt. Your books speak of using knowledge to understand the universe itself. No practical application, just wonder. Isn't wonder practical? Nikolai asked. Doesn't understanding lead to better questions? Thena was quiet for a long moment. Questions are dangerous in a warrior society. They lead to doubt. Doubt leads to weakness. She traced a diagram in the physics book. And yet, questions brought us to the stars. Curious, how your primitive science grasps this truth while my advanced civilization seems to have forgotten it. A alert blinked on Nikolai's tablet, movement in the forest near the crash site. He pulled up the feed from his wildlife cameras. More agents, different team. Better equipped. Military, Thena said, studying the image. Their movement pattern matches tactical search formations. We need to move you. They'll do a house-to-house search soon. No. Thena stood, her full height impressive even in the basement's confines. I must return to the crash site. There's something I need from my ship. It's too dangerous. They have the area surrounded. Her eyes swirled with deep crimson. The deserter I pursue has technology that could devastate your world. Without my ship's tracking systems, I cannot prevent what's coming. Nikolai ran his fingers through his hair, thinking fast. There's an old mining tunnel system. Used for mineral research decades ago. It runs near the crash site. We might be able to approach underground. Might? Welcome to primitive human technology, he said with a slight smile. We improvise. They spent the next hour preparing. Nikolai gathered supplies while Thena used materials from around the basement to modify her armor's capabilities. He found himself fascinated by how she worked, precise movements, no wasted energy, but with an underlying grace that belied her warrior nature. Your injury, he noticed. It's completely healed. My biology adapts quickly. Your atmosphere no longer inhibits my healing. She finished adjusting her armor. Though the process has had unexpected effects. What kind of effects? She met his gaze. I'm experiencing sensory input differently. Your world feels more vivid. Colors, sounds, even gravity itself, everything has taken on new patterns. It's distracting. Heightened perception could be a survival adaptation, Nikolai suggested. Your body compensating for an alien environment. Perhaps. But her tone suggested she didn't believe it was that simple. Or perhaps prolonged exposure to your world is changing me in ways my training never prepared me for. Before Nikolai could respond, a new alert flashed. The military team had found something at the crash site, energy readings that had them very excited. Thena's expression hardened. They've located the pulse core. If they attempt to move it. She let the sentence hang. How bad? Imagine your primitive nuclear weapons, but with a blast radius that ignores physical spacetime constraints. Nikolai checked his old mining maps. The tunnel entrance is hidden in a equipment shed about 2 kilometers from here. If we leave now, we can reach the crash site by nightfall. You're coming with me? Thena's eyes swirled with mixture of colors he hadn't seen before. This isn't your fight, Star Watcher. No, but it's my planet. And you'll need someone who knows the tunnel system. He started gathering gear. Besides, I have questions about those 17 habitable systems you mentioned. That harmonic laugh again, but different somehow. Warmer. Questions during combat? You are a strange one, Nikolai. Says the alien warrior who spent the morning reading physics textbooks. As they prepared to leave, Nikolai caught Thena staring at him with an unreadable expression. What is it? Among my people, warriors bond through shared combat, she said. It creates connections stronger than what you'd call friendship or family. But this. She gestured between them. This is something our training warns us about. Something more dangerous than any weapon. What's that? Understanding. She moved toward the stairs. Come, Star Watcher. Let us hope your tunnels are as hidden as you claim. We have a weapon to secure, a deserter to track, and 17 star systems to discuss. As they made their way to the equipment shed, Nikolai realized that in less than 24 hours, his entire understanding of the universe had shifted. But more than that, he'd found himself drawn into something far more complex than first contact or scientific discovery. He was building a bridge between stars, between ways of thinking, between warrior and scientist. And somewhere out there, a deserter with world-shattering secrets was watching. The real questions were, what were they waiting for, and what would happen when they finally made their move? The answers, Nikolai suspected, would challenge everything both he and Thena thought they knew about their places in the universe. The old mining tunnels wound beneath the Norwegian forest like ancient serpents. Nikolai led the way with a modified lantern that cast just enough light to navigate by, while Thena moved behind him with a predator's silent grace. Her eyes had adapted to the darkness instantly, those vertical pupils dilating to capture every photon of light. These tunnels, she said, her voice echoing strangely off the rock walls, they're magnetite deposits? Yes. Nikolai paused at a junction, consulting his tablet's map. How did you know? The mineral composition is interfering with my armor's sensing capabilities. Convenient for avoiding detection, but... She trailed off, touching the tunnel wall. There's something else. A resonance I've never encountered before. Nikolai checked his instruments. I'm not picking up any unusual readings. No, you wouldn't. It's not something your technology could detect. She was quiet for a moment. On my world, warriors undergo biological enhancement to suppress certain sensory inputs. Emotions, primarily. But here, in these tunnels, something about the magnetic field is disrupting those suppressions. You're saying you're feeling emotions more strongly? Her eyes swirled with colors that seemed almost troubled. Warriors don't feel. We assess, analyze, and act. Emotions are inefficient. Dangerous. And yet you're experiencing them now. Yes. The word carried harmonics of frustration and something else, fear. It's most unsettling. They continued through the tunnels, the air growing colder as they descended deeper. Nikolai found himself hyper-aware of Thena's presence behind him, the way her armor seemed to pulse faintly in rhythm with her breathing. The silence between them felt charged with unasked questions. Finally, they reached a junction where the tunnel split into 3 branches. Nikolai consulted his map again, but Thena suddenly gripped his arm. Wait, she whispered. Something's wrong. Before he could ask what she meant, a high-pitched whine filled the tunnel. Thena moved with blinding speed, pulling him into an alcove just as a pulse of energy scorched the spot where they'd been standing. The deserter, she growled. They're here. Another energy pulse lit up the tunnel. Thena's armor shifted, plates realigning into a more defensive configuration. "Stay behind me," she ordered, producing a weapon that seemed to form from her armor itself. "I thought you couldn't track them in these tunnels," Nikolai said, pressing himself against the rock wall. "They're not trying to hide anymore." Her eyes swirled with deep crimson. "They're hunting us." A figure emerged from one of the tunnel branches, humanoid but wrong somehow, as if their very existence didn't quite align with reality. Their forms seemed to shift and blur, making it impossible to focus on any one detail. "Third Blade," the figure spoke, their voice a discordant mixture of tones. "You're far from the Vanguard's reach. Surrender, deserter," Thena commanded. "Your experiments end here." A sound like breaking glass being played backwards echoed through the tunnel. "Experiments? Is that what they told you I was doing?" The figure's form rippled. "Did they tell you what they really want? What they're really afraid of? Your lies won't work here." "No lies, Third Blade. Only questions. The same questions you've started asking yourself since arriving on this world." The figure gestured toward Nikolai. "Since meeting him." Thena's weapon hummed with building energy. "Warriors don't question. But you have been, haven't you? Wondering why we suppress emotions when they could make us stronger? Why we serve masters who fear discovery more than defeat?" The deserter's form stabilized slightly, revealing features that seemed to blend Arcarian and human characteristics. "I didn't desert, Third Blade. I evolved. What have you done to yourself?" Thena's voice carried notes of horror and fascination. "I embraced change. Something our leaders have feared since discovering Earth centuries ago. Humans aren't primitive, they're adaptable. Their emotions, their creativity, their endless questions, they're everything the Vanguard fears." Nikolai stepped forward, despite Thena's attempt to keep him back. "You've been experimenting with human DNA? DNA, consciousness, quantum states, the boundaries between species are more fluid than either of our civilizations realize." The deserter's form rippled again. "The Vanguard doesn't want to stop me because I'm dangerous. They want to stop me because I'm proof that change is possible." Another energy pulse lit up the tunnel, but this time from behind the deserter. Military forces had found the tunnel entrance. The deserter laughed, a sound that made Nikolai's teeth ache. "It seems we have company. Until next time, Third Blade. Keep asking those questions." Their form blurred and seemed to fold in on itself, disappearing into one of the tunnel branches. Thena moved to pursue, but Nikolai grabbed her arm. "Wait. The military's coming. We need to move." She hesitated, her weapon still raised, those incredible eyes swirling with conflicting colors. For a moment, he thought she would ignore him, but then her armor shifted back to its normal configuration. "The deserter spoke of Earth being discovered centuries ago," she said as they hurried down a different tunnel branch. "That information is classified at the highest levels. How would they know? Could they be lying?" "No." She shook her head. "Warriors are connected to a shared neural network. Lying to each other is difficult. What they said about the Vanguard's fears." She stopped suddenly, pressing a hand against the tunnel wall. "Something's wrong. My thoughts are fragmenting." Nikolai checked his instruments again. "The magnetite deposits are stronger here. If they're affecting your biological suppression systems. Help me," she whispered, her voice stripped of its usual harmonics. "Everything's too bright, too sharp. I can't." He caught her as she stumbled, surprised by how light she felt despite her size. Her armor was warm under his hands, pulsing with what felt like a heartbeat. "Focus on my voice," he said calmly. "What you're feeling is normal. The suppressions are failing, but you're not losing control, you're gaining new awareness. Warriors don't, we can't. Her eyes met his, swirling with colors he'd never seen before. How do you humans bear it? These sensations, these emotions? We don't bear them. We embrace them. They're part of who we are. He helped her stand straighter. Maybe that's what the deserter meant. Maybe suppressing emotions doesn't make you stronger, it just makes you less complete. Thena's hand found his face, those iridescent fingers surprisingly gentle. You're so fragile, she whispered. Your bodies, your world, your hearts, and yet you endure. You create. You dream. Her eyes widened. Dreams. I think I'm starting to dream. Warriors don't dream. Not for centuries. The suppressions. She straightened suddenly, her armor shifting. The military is getting closer. We need to move. They continued through the tunnels, but something had changed between them. Nikolai could feel it in the way she moved, the way her eyes lingered on him when she thought he wasn't looking. The deserter's words had shaken something loose in her, or perhaps just accelerated a process that had already begun. Finally, they reached a vertical shaft that would lead them to the surface near the crash site. As they prepared to climb, Thena spoke softly. If what the deserter said is true, if the Vanguard has been watching Earth for centuries, afraid of how humans might change us. She met his gaze. Then everything I was taught, everything I am, might be based on fear rather than strength. Or maybe, Nikolai suggested, true strength comes from being willing to change, to feel, to dream. Perhaps. Her armor pulsed with what might have been a suppressed shiver. But such thoughts are dangerous for a warrior. More dangerous than a deserter who can bend reality. Than a weapon that ignores spacetime constraints. That harmonic laugh again, but different now, richer, more genuine. Your questions will be the death of me, Star Watcher. Or they might be your salvation. They began their climb toward the surface, toward a crash site that held secrets both mechanical and biological, toward a confrontation that would force them to choose between duty and transformation. Behind them, in the magnetite-laden tunnels, something had changed, not just in Thena, but in the very nature of what was possible when two species dared to dream together. And somewhere in the darkness, a deserter who had embraced change watched, waited, and prepared to show both humans and Arcarians just how fluid the boundaries between stars could become. They emerged from the mining shaft into a world transformed by moonlight. Snow had begun falling again, thick flakes that muffled sound and visibility, perfect cover for approaching the crash site, but also perfect for concealing threats. Thena's armor had shifted to match the winter landscape, its surface taking on crystalline patterns that bent light around her form. The military has established a perimeter, she said, her enhanced vision cutting through the snowfall. 3 teams, advanced scanning equipment. They're trying to access the pulse core. Nikolai checked his tablet's feeds. They've set up some kind of containment field. Energy readings are off the charts. They don't understand what they're dealing with. The pulse core isn't just a power source, it's a quantum anchor. If they disrupt its stability. She turned to him, her eyes swirling with urgent colors. How many settlements are within 1,000 kilometers? 1,000? Several major cities. Why? Because when a quantum anchor destabilizes, it doesn't just explode. It unwrites reality within its radius. Everything that exists, that has ever existed in that space, gone. Not destroyed. Never was. The implications hit Nikolai like a physical blow. How do we stop it? I need to get to my ship's control systems. There's a shutdown sequence, but... She hesitated. Nikolai, what I'm about to tell you, it violates every oath I've taken as a warrior. Tell me anyway. Her armor pulsed with what he now recognized as anxiety. The pulse core's quantum signature is keyed to Arcarian biology. Specifically, to the emotional suppression mechanisms in our nervous systems. It's how we control our most powerful technology, through the absence of feeling. That's why the deserter's presence triggered it, Nikolai realized. Their modified biology disrupted the quantum signature. Yes. And now? She touched her chest where her armor seemed to merge with her skin. Now my suppressions are failing. I may not be able to interface with the controls. A new sound cut through the snowy night, the distinctive hum of Arcarian technology, but larger, more powerful than anything they'd heard before. Thena's posture changed instantly, her entire being radiating tension. No, she whispered. Not now. A massive shape descended through the clouds, an Arcarian ship at least 10 times the size of Thena's crashed vessel. Its design was both beautiful and terrifying, all curved lines and shifting surfaces that seemed to defy physics. The Vanguard, Thena breathed. They sent a paramount. What's a paramount? A supreme commander. One who speaks with the authority of the entire Arcarian military hierarchy. Her eyes fixed on the descending ship. Paramount Crixus. My former mentor. The ship landed with impossible grace despite its size, its hull rippling like liquid metal. A section of its surface flowed open, and a figure emerged that made Thena look small by comparison. The Paramount stood nearly 4 meters tall, their armor so advanced it seemed alive, writhing with patterns that hurt Nikolai's eyes to look at directly. Third Blade Thena, the Paramount's voice resonated at frequencies that made Nikolai's bones vibrate. You have failed to report for neural synchronization. Your emotional suppressions are degrading. Explain. Thena stepped forward, placing herself between Nikolai and her commander. Paramount, the situation is more complex than our initial intelligence suggested. The deserter has found a way to modify their biology, to integrate human genetic. We are aware. The Paramount's interruption carried harmonics of disgust. The aberration must be eliminated. Along with any evidence of their experiments. Including this. Their gaze fell on Nikolai. Contaminating influence. He's not a contamination, Thena said, her voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to surprise even her. He's helped me understand why the deserter chose this path. Why they're not wrong about everything. You speak emotion thoughts, Third Blade. You are compromised. The Paramount's armor shifted, revealing weapons unlike anything Nikolai had ever seen. The human has corrupted you, just as this world corrupted the deserter. This ends now. Military vehicles were approaching the crash site, drawn by the Paramount's arrival. Soon the area would become a battlefield between forces that shouldn't even know of each other's existence. The pulse core, Nikolai said urgently. If it destabilizes. Silence. The Paramount's command carried such force that Nikolai felt his consciousness waver. You understand nothing, human. The pulse core's destabilization is precisely the point. Thena's eyes widened. No, you can't. We can, and we must. Earth's influence must be contained. Your species' capacity for change threatens everything we have built. When the quantum anchor detonates, it will create a permanent dead zone, a space where evolution itself cannot occur. The perfect quarantine. You knew, Thena's voice was thick with emotion she no longer tried to suppress. You knew about Earth, about humans' potential to change us. The deserter wasn't lying. This was never about them, it was about containing humanity's influence. Their chaos infects everything it touches. Look at yourself, Third Blade. Look at what brief exposure to this world has done to you. You feel. You question. You dream. The Paramount raised their weapon. The deserter showed us how dangerous that combination could be. We will not allow it to spread. Nikolai's mind raced. The pulse core was going to detonate no matter what they did, that had been the plan all along. The deserter had known, had been trying to prevent it in their own way. But there might still be a chance. Thena, he said quietly. The magnetite tunnels. If they affected your suppressions. Her eyes swirled with sudden understanding. They would disrupt the quantum anchor's biological signature. She turned to face her former mentor. You're wrong about humanity, Paramount. Their emotions, their dreams, they're not weakness. They're a different kind of strength. Your corruption is complete, the Paramount said. You leave us no choice. Everything happened at once. The Paramount's weapon fired, military vehicles burst through the trees, and Thena moved with impossible speed. Her armor flowed around Nikolai as she tackled him back toward the mine shaft entrance. Energy pulses lit up the night, and the air itself seemed to bend with the power of the Paramount's attacks. They tumbled down the shaft, Thena's armor absorbing most of the impact. In the tunnels, her eyes cast enough light to see by, swirling with colors that spoke of fear, determination, and something deeper. The pulse core, she said as they ran deeper into the tunnel system. Its detonation sequence has already begun. Even in the tunnels, a blast that size. How long? Minutes. The Paramount will try to accelerate it. They reached the junction where they'd encountered the deserter. Nikolai pulled out his tablet, checking the mineral survey maps. Here, he pointed to a deep chamber. Highest concentration of magnetite. If we can get the core there before it detonates. It might contain the quantum effects. Thena's armor shifted. But we'd have to get back to the crash site, past the Paramount, retrieve the core, and reach the chamber in time. You mean I would slow you down? Those incredible eyes fixed on him. No. We do this together or not at all. Why? Because you taught me that some things are worth feeling. Worth dreaming of. Her hand found his face again. Even if we only get one chance to dream them. Above them, the sound of pursuit echoed through the tunnels, both human military and Arcarian forces converging. The pulse core's energy signature was growing stronger, reality itself beginning to warp around its building power. They had minutes to save everything within 1,000 kilometers from being unwritten from existence. The most powerful warrior in Arcarian history wanted them dead. Two civilizations were about to collide in ways that could never be undone. And in the darkness of an ancient mining tunnel, a warrior who had learned to dream and a scientist who had dared to reach for the stars made a choice that would reshape the boundaries between their worlds forever. The price of choosing was high. But as Thena's eyes swirled with colors that spoke of possibilities neither of their species had imagined, both she and Nikolai knew that some prices were worth paying. After all, what was the value of existence without the courage to dream of something more? The magnetite tunnels echoed with the sounds of pursuit as Thena and Nikolai raced through the darkness. Her armor cast shifting patterns of light across the stone walls, while his tablet displayed an ever-decreasing countdown to the pulse core's detonation. The military spreading out through the tunnel system, Nikolai reported, checking his feeds. They're following the core's energy signature. And the Paramount? Thena's eyes swirled with wary colors. No sign on any sensors, but they don't need the tunnels. Thena's armor rippled. A Paramount's armor can phase through solid matter. They're hunting us directly. They reached a chamber where several tunnels converged. Thena suddenly stopped, her head tilting in that predatory way that meant she'd sensed something beyond human perception. The deserter, she whispered. They're close. As if summoned by her words, reality folded in on itself, and the hybrid figure appeared. Their form seemed more stable now, the blend of human and Arcarian characteristics more harmonious. The Paramount's arrival changes everything, the deserter said without preamble. You understand now, Third Blade? What they really fear? Change, Thena replied. The possibility that contact with humanity might transform us into something they can't control. Not just change, evolution. Humanity's greatest strength isn't their technology or their intelligence. It's their capacity to adapt, to grow, to become more than what they were. The deserter's form rippled. Like I have. Like you're beginning to. The pulse core, Nikolai cut in. Can you help us contain it? Better. The deserter's smile was both beautiful and unsettling. I can help you redirect it. But we'll need to work fast, and... They looked at Thena. You'll have to complete your transformation. No more suppressions. No more barriers. That would mean losing my connection to Arcarian technology, Thena said. I wouldn't be able to interface with the core's controls. No, but you'd be able to do something far more important, you'd be able to dream of new possibilities. The chamber suddenly filled with a resonance that made reality itself seem to vibrate. The Paramount emerged through the solid rock wall, their advanced armor making Thena's look primitive by comparison. Abomination, they addressed the deserter. You dare corrupt another of our warriors? I dare to show them the truth you've hidden for centuries. The deserter's form stabilized further, showing a face that somehow captured the best of both species. That we can be more than soldiers. More than servants of a hierarchy built on fear. The pulse core is reaching critical instability, the Paramount said. Soon this entire region will be cleansed of your contaminating influence. Earth's chaotic potential will be contained. Nikolai stepped forward, despite Thena's attempt to stop him. You talk about chaos and contamination, but all I see is fear. Fear of change, of growth, of the possibility that your perfect order might actually be holding you back. You understand nothing, human. No, I understand more than you want me to. Nikolai's voice grew stronger. You suppress emotions not because they make you weak, but because they make you capable of choosing a different path. You're not protecting order, you're enforcing stagnation. The Paramount's armor writhed with patterns of rage. Enough. They raised their weapon, but the deserter moved faster, their modified form blurring as they intercepted the energy blast. Thena, the deserter called out, their form smoking from the impact. The core. Take it to the deep chamber, but first. They threw something to her, a small crystalline device. A gift from my experiments. A key to unlocking your true potential. The Paramount fired again, but this time the deserter caught the energy blast and seemed to absorb it. Go. I'll hold them here. Show them what we can become when we dare to dream. Thena grabbed Nikolai's hand and they ran, leaving behind the sound of two impossibly powerful beings battling in the depths of the earth. Her armor pulsed in rhythm with her racing heart as they made their way back to the surface. The crash site had become a chaos of military vehicles, spotlights, and confused soldiers trying to contain something they couldn't possibly understand. The pulse core sat in a makeshift containment field, its surface writhing with quantum distortions that bent light and reality around it. How do we get past them? Nikolai asked. Thena held up the crystalline device the deserter had given her. By becoming something new. She pressed it against her armor, where it seemed to melt into her very being. I need you to know something, Star Watcher. If this works, I won't be the same. You haven't been the same since we met, he said softly. None of us have. Her eyes swirled with colors he'd never seen before, rich, deep hues that spoke of possibilities beyond either of their species' understanding. Her armor began to shift, not just changing color or pattern, but transforming into something that bridged the gap between Arcarian and human biology. The soldiers noticed them then, weapons raising, orders being shouted. But Thena was already moving, her new form flowing through reality in ways that made Nikolai's mind struggle to comprehend. She reached the pulse core, her transformed armor interfacing with it in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The containment field, someone shouted. It's evolving? Thena's voice carried new harmonics, frequencies that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of space-time. Nikolai. The tunnels. He ran to her as she lifted the pulse core, her evolved form somehow containing its reality-warping energy. Together they made it to the mine shaft, descending into darkness just as the Paramount burst from the ground behind them. "You cannot control that power," the Paramount's voice shook the tunnels. "Your corrupted form will only accelerate the detonation." But something was happening to the pulse core as Thena carried it. Its quantum distortions were changing, forming patterns that matched her new biology. She wasn't fighting the core's instability, she was transforming it, just as she had transformed herself. They reached the deep chamber with its concentrated magnetite deposits. The Paramount followed, their advanced armor beginning to show signs of strain from the mineral's interference. "Don't you see?" Thena's voice carried harmonics of joy, wonder, and something entirely new. "This is what we could all become. Not human, not Arcarian, but something that takes the best of both. Something that can dream and still remain strong." "You've lost your mind," the Paramount snarled, raising their weapon. "No," Nikolai said. "She's found it. Found what your suppression took away centuries ago, the ability to imagine something better." The pulse core's energy reached critical levels, but instead of destroying reality, it began to transform it. The magnetite deposits amplified and channeled its power, creating a space where the boundaries between species, between thought and feeling, between what was and what could be, became fluid. The deserter appeared then, their form now perfectly stable. "You feel it, don't you, Paramount? The potential you fought so hard to deny? The power of letting yourself change?" The chamber filled with quantum energy, reality rippling like water. But instead of unwriting existence, it began to rewrite it, not erasing what was, but expanding what could be. The Paramount's armor began to crack, centuries of suppressed emotions and possibilities breaking through. What is this?" "Evolution," Thena said softly. "Not chaos, not contamination. Just growth." The pulse core's light grew blinding, but instead of destroying, it transformed. The magnetite chamber became a crucible of change, a place where the rigid boundaries between species dissolved and reformed into something new. When the light faded, the chamber had become something impossible, a space where quantum reality responded to emotion, where thought and feeling could reshape the very fabric of existence. The Paramount stood changed, their armor now flowing with patterns of possibility rather than control. All this time, they whispered, their voice carrying new harmonics of wonder. "All this time we thought we were protecting ourselves. When you were really just preventing your own evolution," the deserter finished. "Humanity didn't threaten us with their chaos. They showed us what we'd forgotten, that true strength comes from adapting, from feeling, from daring to become more than we are." Thena's new form stabilized, neither human nor Arcarian but something that celebrated both. Her eyes still swirled with impossible colors, but now they carried depths of feeling and understanding that her warrior training had never allowed her to imagine. The pulse core, Nikolai realized. "You didn't just contain it. You used it to create, what exactly?" "A bridge," Thena said, taking his hand. Her touch carried echoes of both species, warm and ethereal at once. "A place where change isn't just possible, it's inevitable. A gift to both our peoples." Above them, the military was cautiously approaching the mine entrance. Soon they would discover that something fundamental had shifted in this deep chamber. The world would learn that they weren't alone in the universe, but more importantly, they would learn that the boundaries between species were more fluid than anyone had imagined. The deserter smiled. "And so it begins. Not with invasion or conflict, but with transformation. With the courage to dream beyond the stars we know." The Paramount's changed form radiated acceptance. "I will return to our people. They must understand what we've discovered here. What we can become when we stop fearing change." "And you?" Nikolai asked Thena. "What will you become?" Her eyes swirled with colors that spoke of infinite possibilities. "Whatever I dream. Whatever we dream." after all. She smiled, a gesture that combined the best of both their species. Isn't that what stars are for? To show us that even the most distant lights can come together to create something new? In the depths of the earth, in a chamber where reality had learned to dance with dreams, two species began a journey beyond the boundaries they'd built around themselves. And in the space between stars, in the quantum realm where thought met feeling, new possibilities awakened. For in the end, the greatest discovery wasn't first contact or advanced technology or even the power to reshape reality. It was the simple truth that love, whether between individuals or species, had always been the most transformative force in the universe. All it took was the courage to dream, and the wisdom to let those dreams change you into something more than you ever imagined you could be.